Up there. I went up to Trinidad. Oh, yeah, so yeah, to me. Because grades, the doubles are better when you're not a student.
Good morning, His Excellency, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Mrs. Jan, Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, your line, Honorable Justice John Drysdale, High Court Judge, also of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Next is the Judge, Honorable Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham, Honorable Master Alvin Fariat Singh, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Honorable Levi A. Peter, Distinguished Attorney General, Ambassador Francine Barron, former Attorney General, Tamika Burton, Solicitor General, Distinguished Director of Public Prosecutions, Ms. Shirley Dalrymple, the Honorable Registrar of the High Court, Ms. Marie-Therese Etienne, the Honorable Deputy Registrar, Noraya Sebastian, former Attorney General, Mr. Henry Dyer, Mrs. Noelise Knight, Didier, President of the Bar Association, the members of the Inner and Outer Bar, Mr. Daniel James, Clerk of the House of Assembly, the family members of the late Alix Boyd Knight, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to be sharing today's proceedings with my sister judge as we pay homage and pay tribute to the late Honorable Ms. Eileen Alix Boyd Knight, born on the 28th of December 1944, and who left us on the 29th of August this year. To her daughters, her siblings, her sons-in-law, grandchildren, godchildren, nieces, nephews, lifelong friends, we discuss them to pay tribute to members of the legal profession, and indeed it behoves us for such a distinguished daughter to do so. Permit me, first of all, to recognize the family and friends and associates of the late Mrs. Eileen Alix Boyd Knight. As we commence this commemorative sit-in to honor the memory of this outstanding and distinguished daughter of the Caribbean civilization, I ask that we all stand for a period of respect, reflection, and recognition of the Honorable Eileen Alix Boyd Knight. A little more than 2 weeks ago, I arrived in the Commonwealth of Dominica, the first and only republic in the Windward Islands, where the nation was mourning following the death the day before of Mrs. Boyd Knight on Tuesday, the 29th of August, 2023. Our region has lost a few matriarchs and legal luminaries this year. Mrs. Boyd Knights was predeceased by Mrs. Justice Claire Henry of Antigua and Barbuda in June, and Dame Monica Joseph of Grenada in July. They have received their honors. Today, we respectfully, but somewhat sadly, pay tribute and honor to a distinguished, trailblazing daughter of the Commonwealth of Dominica. The government of the Commonwealth of Dominica ended its press statement announcing the death of the Speaker Emerita of the House of Assembly by saying, "We honor her," and I quote, "We honor her for her long and faithful service to the Commonwealth of Dominica and for her advocacy on behalf of the vulnerable. She will be dearly missed," unquote. His Excellency, the President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Mr. Charles Sabrin, noted, Speaker Emerita Boyd Knight was a true patriot and prominent Caribbean woman who will be remembered for her almost 20 years of dedicated and sterling service to the House of Assembly, her strong advocacy on the rights of vulnerable people, for women, for children, and her great love for carnival, cooking, hosting, and horticulture, unquote. This country's highest court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, and the CCJ's Academy of Law, said it was saddened to learn of the passing of Mrs. Boyd Knight. They noted that, and I quote, "For her outstanding contribution to Caribbean law, Speaker Boyd Knight was recognized by the CCJ, Academy of Law, as a pioneering Caribbean woman jurist in 2021, unquote." Assembled today, we have a host of worthy speakers who will provide far more eloquent and fulsome tribute to this outstanding Caribbean legal luminary, the Honorable Alix Boyd Knight. It's my distinct honor to call on the Honorable Madam Justice Bernie Stevenson, High Court Judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, who did some service here in the Commonwealth of Dominica, to now address you. Justice Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Justice Williams. I hope you all are hearing me.
Indeed.
Hello, good morning. Today we gather to memorialize and remember a fallen comrade and colleague, the Honorable Eileen Alix Boyd Knight, Madam Speaker Emerita, Attorney at Law, parent, grandparent, godmother, auntie, baker, cook, gardener, and the list can go on and on. First of all, permit me to thank the Honorable Chief Justice, Dame Janice Pereira, for permitting me to participate in today's special sitting as a judge. Permit me to recognize the presence of His Excellency Hubert J. Charles, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mrs. Charles, Honorable Justice Colin Williams, Senior Resident Judge, and Honorable Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham, Resident High Court Judges of the Commonwealth of Dominica, the Honorable Jan Drysdale, High Court Judge, Resident High Court Judge in the Circuit of Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Master Alvin Pariat Singh, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly of the Commonwealth of Dominica, the Honorable Levi A. Peter, Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Ambassador Francine Barron, former Attorney General, Counsel, Mrs. Tamika Burton, Solicitor General of the High Court of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Miss Sharma Dalrymple, Director of the Public Prosecutions, and I pause to say that these two young ladies were the first two lawyers, among the first two lawyers I ever called to the bar as a judge. Miss Marie-Therese Etienne, Registrar of the High Court, Mrs. Noraya Sebastian, Deputy Registrar, the Registrar of Titles of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Mrs. Vincia Ogis, Mr. Henry Dyer, former Attorney General, Mrs. Noelise Knight Didier, President of the Bar Association, other distinguished members of the Inner and Outer Bar of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Mr. Daniel James, Clerk of the House of the Assembly, the Honorable Mr. Raphael Trotman, former Speaker of the House of the Parliament of Guyana and member of the opposition, the Parliament of Guyana, family members, friends, colleagues of the late Eileen Alix Boyd Knights, and other invited guests. I especially greet the members of her family and her friends, and it really would be remiss of me not to greet you all properly, as I dare say she would expect me to do, and say, bonjour, tout le monde. I am aware that she had lived a very multifaceted life, including her life was that of the Speaker of the House of Assembly of the Commonwealth of Dominica, a role that she was recognized for by our apex court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, in their publication on women jurists of our region. I note that after her retirement as Speaker of the House, she was bestowed with the honor of being Honorable Speaker Emerita by the government of Dominica. That aspect of her life, I know she took very seriously and totally enjoyed it. The Honorable Boyd Knights was not always, or is not necessarily, the most popular person in Dominica. And like myself, she was subjected to much personal vilification and attacks from those who see it fit to hide behind pen names on social media, who see themselves as commentators on the island. She quite often comforted me and told me, it's not the truth, ignore them and move on. It comes with the territory. Counsel Boyd Knights of Adela's Law Chambers reminded me that there's one above who sees it all and knows it all, and that is exactly what I did. I hasten to say that we also got comfort from what is stated in the Bible, that there are more of them for us that was against us. I do believe, and I am indeed subject to correction, that Mrs. Boyd Knights had probably the single honor in our region, certainly in our courts, to study and qualify with her younger daughter, Iandra. I also note, I have been advised and verily believe that she also studied with the Honorable Raphael Trotman, particularly at the Hugh Wooding Law School. Counsel Alix Boyd Knights appeared before me in the 13.5 years that I sat in the Commonwealth of Dominica. She appeared primarily in family, caveat, and estate matters. She was a bold and demanding and tenacious as an attorney, and was always courteous to the court. She was always prepared to fight for the rights of her clients. And I hasten to say, she was not about winning by any means necessary, but she was about obtaining the best results and the best and equitable results for her clients, particularly in family matters. Early in my tenure as a judge assigned to Dominica, I recall doing an ancillary matter, and the husband in that matter was a Calypsonian who shall remain nameless. And that year, for Carnival, he actually wrote a song which also shall remain nameless, which we all assumed and in fact knew was about her. That really was the art, or is the art of Calypso. When that Calypsonian appeared before me with his lawyer and his wife, who was represented by Mrs. Boyd Knights in chambers, I was quick to tell him, and I warned him that I did not expect him to go write a calypso about me, as you have written about counsel. Well, Mrs. Boyd Knights responded in what I considered to be the most beautiful and appropriate manner. As she said, well, my lady, judge, I am prepared to dance across the stage for him at the Carnival Calypso competition. Well, I do not partake in Carnival activities, so I do not know if she ever did dance across the stage for him. But I do know she loved her Carnival. In the same way, when I first came to the circuit of Dominica, I had cause to speak to her and a few others to tone down the contents of their divorce petitions, as we did not necessarily want to hang people's dirty linen in public. And I encouraged them to utilize the no-fault grounds that appear in our legislation. Mrs. Boyd Knights tried her best to comply. Counsel also had a passion for cooking, and I have heard stories about her cooking and baking, and I've heard stories about her making wedding cakes and the beauty of those wedding cakes. She was also known for her passion for cooking at the independent season, which was a very important season for her. Even to the point that post-Hurricane Maria, when there were no crabs to be had and the season was never opened, so she could make her crab backs and her crab and callaloo, she managed to apply for and obtain a permit to import crabs from one of our neighboring islands so she could make her crab backs and her crab and callaloo. Again, I cannot say that what they tasted like, but as a judge, I can entertain the testimony of others, and I do accept the testimony that they were good. Mrs. Boyd Knights also had a passion for gardening, and through one of my best friends who had caused to visit her home on behalf of one of her clients, found out that she had a pomerac tree in her yard. My best friend knows that pomeracs are my absolute favorite fruits in the world. And I must say, they are plenteous in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Anyway, my bestie's boyfriend promptly picked some and brought for me. Mrs. Boyd Knights was overjoyed that she found that there was something I liked and that she could possibly send for me. I managed to get a couple from her before the parrots enjoyed her crop. She was also very passionate about her flowers in her garden. I've never seen the garden myself, but as I said before, I have been advised by persons who has attended her home and verily believe that it was a sight to behold. I did not have many opportunities to talk with Mrs. Boyd Knights whilst I lived in Dominica, but I was able to talk with her whenever we met up at cricket or at the Flowline booth at Creole in the Park prior to the passage of Hurricane Maria. And she spoke to me of her desire to host a cooking show on TV. and of her desire to set up a kitchen where she could teach tourists and persons coming to Dominica how to prepare Creole and Dominica food. I do not know if that ever materialized. As a Speaker of the House of Parliament in Dominica, I know she was passionate about training other members of the House and speakers of the Houses of Parliament across the region and indeed across the world. I pause to say that the Honorable Raphael Trotman, the former Speaker of the House of Parliament in Guyana, described her as, and I quote, a very special person, unquote. I know she had the enviable privilege of traveling worldwide to attend various parliamentary meetings and conferences, and I would not be surprised if she did not touch and probably visit every continent in the world, or that maybe she visited over 40 to 50 countries as she took part in the activity of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. I was privileged to attend her book launch on the women in Parliament in Dominica. And I recall indicating this to my own mother, who as a librarian and information specialist herself, was in the process of coordinating that kind of information on women in Parliament in the country of my birth, Guyana. I must mention she, Mrs. Boyd Knights, was also very concerned about the speakers in the region. And I know for sure that when her fellow speaker, the Honorable Raphael Trotman in Guyana, faced serious health challenges, she reached out to me to get in touch with him to express her concern. Mrs. Boyd Knights, even though she was one of the senior practitioners in years, made every effort to participate in the courts by Zoom, even though she had to rely on her faithful and trusted steed and her right hand, Cassandra Norday. And I'm told that Cassandra was later joined by her sister, Heather. I know she had every trust and totally relied on Cassandra to keep her practice up and running. She managed and was able to partake in Zoom during the COVID quake. Mrs. Boyd Knights was also very fond of her family. She was very proud of her daughters and sons-in-law and grandchildren. And boy, oh boy, did she love that first grandson. To the moon and back. I heard about her grandson, Pip, when he graduated from high school to when he graduated from the University of the West Indies. He was the beloved grandson in whom she was well pleased. There are some things that persons do not know about me. And one of the things I do is, in spite of what people say and in spite of what they think, maybe the negative tendencies of some persons, my modus operandi is to focus on what is best in the person. And for Mrs. Boyd Knights, I focused on her tenacity. I focused on her goodwill. I focused on her ability to make a good joke. I focused on her ability to make light of certain situations which persons would have cried, or even myself would have cried about and made a whole brouhaha about. She was one tough cookie, and she survived it all. I recall meeting her in the airport in Antigua one year, and her teasing the protocol officers there, and observing the warmth that they dealt with her, which is only evidence of the kind of person that they saw her to be and had to deal with quite often. I've heard Learned Counsel Siobhan Lloyd from St. Lucia over and over again, referred to her very fondly as Auntie Alix. She embraced both Council and Council's mom. You would believe that they were blood family. As is well known by the lawyers here for many years, even though I was designated the criminal judge, I carried my weight of civil matters, including my monthly divorce list. And those of you will know and remember that I insisted on doing divorces on the last Friday in October, which is World Creole Day. This was simply to satisfy my selfish desire to see certain lawyers dressed in the full Creole regalia in their WAP duets. And I made sure that Mrs. Boyd Knights had at least one matter on the list. Of course, that there was also Mrs. Blomkis Williams, Mrs. Telemack, Miss Joel Harris, and recently Miss Candice Ducre. Councillor Graham, I suggest you take note. These ladies were resplendent in their WAP duets. I remember seeing Mrs. Boyd Knights at my first independence in Dominica in 2009 and was absolutely fascinated and stunned by her WAP duet with her fan and her parasol made out of anglais to match her outfit. It's a picture I have in my mind even today and will never ever forget. I am reminded, or I have been corrected, that her loyal steed was Cassandra, Norde, and not Heather. In closing, there was one thing I do not believe persons knew. When I first came to Dominica, Mrs. Boyd Knights and I bonded over something which had nothing to do with the court and nothing to do with her role in Dominica as Speaker of the House. I was allowed to use her office at the House of Parliament as I sat at the Parliament, and I could not manage the stairs easily. And there were times that we were simply chit-chat, and we bonded over this very early. We shared a common pain. She was a grieving grandmother, and I discovered that she lost a grandchild, Ari, in the United States, and was in pain about that. And I, having lost my only son, both being children who were toddlers at the time of their death, we shared our mutual pain. And for me, it still is what it is today. However, I managed, and I believed I persuaded her to let her know that her grandbaby was dancing with the angels. And that was the better way to see it, as it gave us both something to smile about and some comfort. Today, I say that I hope that she is sitting in her rocking chair on her veranda and she is able to cheerfully watch Ari and Bobby, my son and her granddaughter, dance with the angels and other toddlers, including and not forgetting my Dominican granddaughter, who I call Caramia. In closing, I would say this: the Lord has plucked a lily or an anthurium from the garden because he has use for it. And I would say to members of her family, her friends, her colleagues, those present in the courtroom, and those who are listening via Zoom, please do accept my profound condolences. Today, we bid goodbye to one who was loved by many, to one who loved many, and who would never be forgotten. whose life has been indelibly inscribed into the history of our lovely Waitakabuli. Hers was a life well spent. Her footsteps can never be filled, nor her life ever forgotten. The vibrancy of her life lived, never fades. And now the time has come for us to say our final farewell. All of us will keep our memories of Councillor Alix Boyd Knights of Adela Chambers close forever. And as we say goodbye, we lift up her life as an inspiration of love, grace, and wisdom. She will be forever missed. Honorable Eileen Alix Boyd Knights, I say, rest in peace, and may perpetual light shine on you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, Your Honors, or my lords, Williams and Graham, I would like to say, may it please you, my lords. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Justice Bernie Stevenson. I now to invite the Honorable Attorney General, the Honorable Peter.
May it please your lordships, His Excellency Hubert J. Charles, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mrs. Charles. Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, High Court Judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Honorable Justice Colin Williams, Resident High Court Judge. Honorable Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham, Resident High Court Judge. Honorable Master Alvin Paria Singh. Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly. May it please your lordships, I've been indicated that I may adopt the remaining protocol. May I firstly extend apologies on behalf of the Honorable Prime Minister. He has asked me to expressly convey his sincere apologies for his unavoidable absence from this sitting, which he should very much have wished to attend. And he's asked me to convey on his behalf condolences to the family, friends, and all who are affected by the passing of Speaker Emerita, Mrs. Alix Boyd Knights. My lords, Eileen Alix Boyd Knights, Speaker Emerita, a passionate and formidable advocate, diligent, motivated, committed to her causes and to her issues. Speaker Emerita, as the title conveys, indicates someone who has contributed in the particular field, in this instance, the field of being Speaker of the House for an extended period of time, in her case, some 2 decades. During that period, she has traversed pretty much the world, as has been indicated by the previous speaker, her ladyship, Bernie Stevenson. And during that time, she has managed to make an imprint on all who she has met, an imprint for herself and for Dominica. I have traveled quite widely, and during my travels, on many occasions, I've met individuals who have asked fondly, in most instances, of Speaker Emerita, and have expressed the impact that she has had on them in various fora that they have encountered her. She was a fearless champion for the causes and issues that she held there. As we know, insofar as Dominica is concerned, a particular championship was on behalf of the vulnerable, in particular women and children, for their protection and for their rights. And indeed, I am told that, and I trust that the historian that recounted this to me is a factual or accurate historian. But if not, I lay all of the blame at his door. It's not mine. But my understanding is that the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act 2001, which until recently was the legislative framework within which domestic violence matters and matters related to certain aspects of protection of domestic situations for both parents, usually mothers, and children, was significantly contributed to, if not a cause of her advocacy. And indeed, I understand that the drafting of that piece of legislation was substantially contributed to by Speaker Emerita. Indeed, there is a member of the bar who sits in this court this morning, who I understand had a strong hand in supporting that work, as with her ladyship, Bernie Stevenson. That individual shall remain nameless. Those who know the individual will know. But I will adopt from her ladyship, Bernie Stevenson, that particular phrase, as indeed I suspect I may have to adopt most of her address this morning, because I have no intention, no ability to go to the length that she went, and I perhaps should say length and breadth that she went. But in my short contribution, I certainly want to pay homage to her and express the profound loss of her passing. She was somebody who I had occasion to engage with more over the past number of years, since I became a member of the House of Assembly and joined her in that arena and was able to interact with her more. But I always recall whenever either I engaged with Speaker Emerita or in certain conversations about her, I always recollect my first personal and professional interaction with her, somewhere I believe in about 2008, 2009. It's an interaction that I mentioned at the last sitting of Parliament during remarks acknowledging her passing. But it's something that always gives me a bit of a smile, but it is something that encapsulates the character of Speaker Emerita. It was a family matter. I was in private practice at the time, having left the magistracy, and at the time making my way in a fledgling private practice. I was representing the father, and Speaker Emerita was representing the mother, the wife. And we met for a chambers hearing, outside chambers. We, as council frequently do, engaged in discussion with a view to seeking whether we could arrive at some form of consent order to present. And Speaker Emerita was very clear as to what she wanted. I'm not sure she heard what I wanted, but we engaged, discussed, and it became clear that it certainly became clear to me that I was not able to travel the distance that she wished me to travel with her. And I think it probably became clear to her at some point, and at which point she pointedly warned me that she would be telling the judge when we got into chambers. And indeed, she did proceed to seek to tell the judge, but the judge suggested that perhaps both of us could express our versions of events, and the judge would make a determination, which is what happened. And a determination was made with which I was well pleased. We left the chambers, we never discussed that particular issue again. We continued to be fraternal colleagues, and certainly in the parliamentary sense, we continued that. And quite frequently, I would either go to see Speaker Emerita in her chambers at Parliament, or sometimes she would call me if there was a matter that she felt that she either needed to bring to my attention or she wished to have my views upon. But we've always had a very cordial relationship in our engagements, whether professionally or socially. And I perhaps might add that the judge on that occasion is a judge who will remain nameless, but is participating in the proceedings today. But yes. So it is relevant, that particular event, because it encapsulated for me the force of character of Speaker Emerita. She would present her case and advocate for her case, her cause, her issue with a passion, with a diligence, with a commitment that is certainly admirable, and one that I think for all legal practitioners is one that we would do well to emulate. I mean, we may not necessarily take all of the style, but the commitment is something that I think would benefit all legal practitioners and indeed all individuals to be committed to whatever cause is that you are engaged in, to do it to your fullest capacity and ability. And certainly from my experience of Speaker Emerita, she did that, and she encapsulated that. It is also heartwarming to me to reflect on engagements with Speaker Emerita, and indeed sometimes observing her during her during the time that she would manage, oversee, sometimes try to corral. Sometimes the behavior can be boisterous. Sometimes it can be, some might describe it as childlike within the House of Parliament. And in that sphere, she had to bring all of her characteristics and skills to bear in trying to control the House, and sometimes giving determinations, recognizing that in those situations, you can't please everybody. So no matter what the decision you arrive at, somebody is not going to be happy. But she was steadfast in that role, and she was able to command the respect, although in some instances it might be respect with a lowercase r, but the fact is she was in charge, and she made it clear that she was the House. There was a single speaker, and that speaker for the time she sat in the seat was her. And whether you agreed with her or not, that was her ruling. And so as she herself has said, that her legal training assisted her greatly in her discharge of her function as Speaker. And I would have thought that that would have to be the case, and that she discharged those functions admirably and with a dedication and diligence that perhaps now she has passed, maybe even grudgingly acknowledged by more people than have perhaps hitherto done so. I also recall the social and personal interactions with Speaker Emerita at events such as cricket. She was quite an ardent fan. One would certainly, I often met her as a spectator at cricket matches, also at the annual festivals, in particular World Korean Music and other social events. And she was very sociable. Once you got to know her, engaging and discuss and talk, and something that's not often mentioned about her. She was very, very ready, willing, and free with her advice on pretty much anything. Her passions, as we've heard, and I'm sure others who are more knowledgeable than me will say, culinary matters, gardening, and of course general issues were dear to her heart. She spoke with a passion about her crab backs and about her black pudding, and of course many of the cakes and other savories that she would make. But I certainly enjoyed interacting with her in those social settings. She was also someone who had a very deep knowledge of the Dominican society, in sense of being able to link and tell you about family linkages and some of the stories that are associated with some of those family histories, and some of them are very interesting. That's interesting with a small I as well as with a capital I. But yes, I certainly will miss those interactions with Speaker Emerita. And in conclusion, I would wish to simply say this, my lady and my lord, that the passing of Alix Boyd Knight is a significant blow, significant loss to the legal fraternity, and to all those who, of course, who have known her. And I would simply wish to, on my own behalf, on behalf of the Chambers of the Attorney General, on behalf of the legal fraternity more generally, on behalf of the Honorable Prime Minister, as already said, and on behalf of the Cabinet of Dominica, to express our sincere condolences to the family, friends, and all others who may have been affected by the passing of Speaker Emerita. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Attorney General. And we will ask the former Attorney General, Ambassador Francine Barrett.
May it please you, my lord, Honorable Justice Colin Williams, my lady, Honorable Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham. With your permission, I would seek to adopt the protocol already established, except to specifically recognize the presence with us today of the President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, His Excellency Hubert John Charles, and Mrs. Charles, Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, Honorable Justice Jan Drysdale, Honorable Master Alvin Paria Singh, and the family of the late Alix Boyd Knight. My lord, my lady, I thank you for the opportunity to address the court and to say a few words in tribute to one of our own, a colleague and a friend, and to honor the memory of Alix Boyd Knight and her contribution to this court, its jurisprudence, and our country. I was actually in one of her favorite cities, London, when I heard of her untimely passing. I was deeply shocked and saddened by that news. At times like this, it is always difficult to determine what to say. How does one capture the essence of a woman who has led such a full life and accomplished so much? You would have seen from the tribute in the program and heard from the persons who spoke before me, and from perhaps all the other tributes that have poured out since her untimely passing, what a truly remarkable person Alix Boyd Knight was. She was a fierce defender of women, and she made no apologies for it. She wanted to see women elevated, their circumstances improved, and she tackled issues of violence against women and children with passion and determination. I am sure that there are many women around Dominica who can speak to the positive impact that Alix Boyd Knight had on them and their lives, and how she inspired them and helped them out of difficult situations. She embodied the essence of what it is to be a strong Dominican woman. She was also very passionate about the rights of the child and on issues of child protection, and was instrumental in the passage of various pieces of legislation, as we've already heard, to protect the rights of women and children, including the Family Bills, the Domestic Violence Act, and the Sexual Offences Act. I would like to suggest, and I am pleased that the Attorney General is here, and I hope that he can convey and breathe life into what I'm going to put forward now. I suggest to this honorable court that a fitting way to remember the life and contribution of Alix Boyd Knight would be for a multi-jurisdictional task force to be set up to deal in particular with the scourge in our society of the sexual abuse of our children. No child molester, no abuser of children should feel safe, protected, or above the law in our country. And more importantly, we need to stop or deter these heinous acts before they are perpetrated on our children. This is something that I know that Alix Boyd Knight felt very strongly about. And I think the time has come for us to treat the sexual abuse of our children as a national crisis, a national issue that requires a deliberate and coordinated response. I think that would be a fitting tribute to the memory of a woman who defended the rights of children, the rights of women, so strongly and passionately. We have laws, they are there, but so much more needs to be done. My lord, my lady, Alix Boyd Knight has had a distinguished career. And it was indeed fitting that in 2021, our highest court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, the Academy of Law, chose to honor Alix Boyd Knight as a pioneering Caribbean woman jurist for her contribution to Caribbean law. And I think it also bears repeating at this time the quotation from Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, who said that quite apart from her illustrious career in law and parliamentary affairs in Dominica and the wider Commonwealth for over 30 years, Boyd Knight has been sharing her love for culinary arts with people all over the world. She has used radio, television, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as face-to-face sessions to teach women to cook, preserve, and process food to generate income and to lift themselves from poverty, end quote. My lord, my lady, I think I could be bold enough to say that while Alix Boyd Knight enjoyed a successful career at the bar, she thought of herself less as a lawyer and more as a cook who practiced law. Those of us who were fortunate enough to taste her cooking can tell you that she was an excellent cook. And I can only say to Justice Stevenson that you definitely missed something good. She had a love for cooking and she generously shared her talent and know-how with others. And that is part of who she was. She wanted to uplift others and to see things done well. I was also privileged to have known Alix Boyd Knight not only as a lawyer and friend, but I was fortunate to have served twice in Parliament in different capacities under her stewardship as Speaker of the House. Her job was not an easy one, and we have heard Attorney General Levi Peter refer to that. But like everything else that she did, she was tenacious, she was decisive, and she was willing to take action, even if it was not popular, and even though it would result in some backlash to her. It was during her 20-year tenure as Speaker that she decided to bring a greater sense of stature, or perhaps a bit of pomp and ceremony to the House. And she sought to persuade the ladies to attend, decked out in their fancy hats. I must confess that although I was seldom persuaded, and she did scold me for it, that practice has certainly caught on, and it's just one more example of her wanting to do things well. She also advocated strongly for there to be more women in Parliament. And although I am sure that she was pleased that Dominica for years now has led the region in meeting the minimum standard advocated for under the Beijing Platform for Action of at least 33.33% of the Parliament being female, she would have been much happier if that figure were closer to 50%. So we still have some work to do. My lord, my lady, I am not sure if it was also widely known that Alix was also a bit of a horticulturist. I think some mention has been made of it already. she definitely loved plants. I guess she just had a love for everything that was beautiful. And she had a variety of beautiful plants in her garden. I think her home in Trafalgar could be described as an oasis, a place that she could retire to and release the stresses of everyday life. My lord, my lady, there is no doubt that Eileen Alix Boyd Knight has left a mark on Dominica and beyond our shores. She has been a mother and grandmother, a writer, a culinary arts teacher, a lawyer, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Chair of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and so much more, as you have heard today, and you will probably hear further today. Dominica has lost a little giant, a formidable woman. She will definitely be missed. My lord, my lady, for Alix Boyd Knight's family was everything, and we've heard that referred to today. And I recall how she would speak with pride, particularly of her grandchildren. I wish to express my deepest sympathies to her family. I am sure that her loss is being deeply and keenly felt. And I can only pray that God grant you strength and see you through this difficult time. May she rest in eternal peace. May it please you, my lord, my lady.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohammed General. And the former Attorney General as well, Mr. Hidayat.
Thank you, my lord. Let me first begin by welcoming you to this jurisdiction. I'm sure you will find it rich and exciting, and hope that you will be here with us for some time. My lord and my lady, I'd like to protocol established, protocol established, but I'd like to recognize the family of Alix Boyd Knight. I see her daughter and her brother, the Alman family. And her friends and colleagues. And also recognize the Speaker of the House, Mr. Joseph Isaac, if is there. My lord, I decided to give these remarks of Alix because I think I am duty bound in conscience to do this. And I say so because as the first elected student representative of the KVL campus law faculty on the academic board, it wasn't an easy election. But I was not alone, a Dominican there. There were the other islands when you were fighting against the upsurge of the Jamaicans in large numbers, the Trinidadians in large numbers. But the smaller we rallied, and some of them rallied against me. And I wasn't the only Dominican there. There was Justin Simon, who is a former Attorney General of Antigua. And there was Evelina Grell, she was there. And there was Isaiah Thomas from St. Joseph, who subsequently became the Minister of Health in Dominica. So we were the 4 Dominicans there. And we were the first 4 graduates. And you know, they refer to us as the trailblazers of the class of 73. Justin and myself are the 2 remaining so far. My lord, lady, I know Alix as a schoolgirl. She lived in Fields Lane, and I lived in River Street in Roseau. And they were the friends, you know. She went to the convent, I went to the grammar school, and there were little groups when we went to the botanical gardens no lights there, you went to study at the time. And there were girls, Alix was girls with Joan Etienne, Jacqueline, John, Lita, and there was Alison Southwell. There were the groups, young girls. And the boys, there was Tony Robinson, there was Irvin Stevens, there was Hugh Pinard. And we all worked together in those days. As a matter of fact, I knew Honest when I lived in school, she worked at the parcel post with Hewitt Pinard. She and Hewitt Pinard carried the parcel post Department of Government. And I think she worked in the bank. Alix, I got to know Alix further when Rosie Douglas was Prime Minister of Dominica. He lived with my family, with me in River Street at the time. He lived there for 3 years with us. He was from Portsmouth. And that's how I got to know Alix even closer, because he was very close to Alix, and living in River Street, we were all in Roseau, you know. And I remember that during the elections of 2000, when Rosie Douglas became Prime Minister of Dominica, Alix Boyd Knight then was living next to my mother's place in King George V Street. Her chambers was there. And the office of the Labour Party campaign was right next to my mother's place there. And Alix next to her chambers. And during that campaign, you know, it's always, the campaign is always heated. And my mother regarded Rosie as her adopted son. As I said, he lived with us. And during that campaign, Rosie would leave the campaign house, and my mother was then living just a few houses away on King George V Street next to us. And he would go there in a way, I would say, in hiding, because he didn't want the pressure on him. And my old lady burns everybody. And if Rosie went in there and people come in, she says, he's not there, you know. And, you know, because she was living upstairs and they would have to get the caretaker. My mother was the old caretaker to come and open for Rosie to come up. And then they would knock some people and she says, go and see who's there. And if it wasn't somebody that Rosie didn't want, they wouldn't allow the person to come up. And when Alix, no, she said, Alix, yes. Alix was coming there because she was bringing his snacks for him and taking his rest. And she said, oh, Alix, open. So that when Alix became Speaker of the House, it was not a surprise for me. In fact, on the night and the day of the election when Rosie won, it was my mother's birthday, the 31st of January. Alix, as Speaker of the House, she played her part. I remember that when we were passing, then I as Attorney General, I remember we were passing the legislation for the CCJ. And I went to her and I said that, well, look, the CARICOM Secretary General, Carrington, was in Dominica. He was come to Dominica. And it would be a good thing if, whilst Parliament, at the time it's in session, for him to address Parliament. And she quickly said yes and organized. So that when we were debating the pieces of legislation for the CCJ, we had the privilege of having CARICOM Secretary General Carrington to sit with her in Parliament, after Parliament, to explain the objectives and the reason for the passage of this pieces of legislation. That was Alix Boyd Knight. I remember Alix Boyd Knight when there was a national exhibition in Dominica. And Alix Boyd Knight I didn't know she had a booth, and it was held in the Botanical Gardens. And she had a booth. I didn't know she had a booth there, but I had a booth. I was displaying my, they refer to me, as the driftwood artist. And I had this piece of driftwood artist in my booth. And one afternoon at the exhibition, I saw Alix Charles Maynard, who was the Minister of Government, or the Minister of Government, coming into my booth. He walked into my booth and she said, and excuse me, because she referred to me, as I referred to her as Alix, she referred to me as Baba, my nickname. And she came and she said, Baba, I didn't know you could do this. I said, I could do a lot of things. And we had a good chat there, and we walked from my booth to her booth where she was displaying the cakes that she made and the countries and whatnot. So it was, that was Alix. I remember again that when Alix was building her chambers, the planning division came and told her, stop the building because you're obstructing your neighbors and whatnot. And she, Alix was this firm person. And she appealed against the planning division's decision. Fortunately, I was chairperson of the appeals board of the planning. And she came and we discussed it. And she agreed that she had to amend her plans for the building. That was Alix Boyd Knight. I remember Alix Boyd Knight organizing the burial of her brother, Donald Boyd. And I remember when after the burial funeral, there was the happy hour in the Nassib's building opposite DBS. And I said, I must go to the happy hour to congratulate Alix for the wonderful, because she was the only real close person left in Dominica so that she could organize the funeral. And I felt, because Donald Boyd and myself were very close in the sense that he was an engineer. And then when I was the minister in the government, he was working in Barbados with Clarence Johnson. And I was able to get him, the government, the Freedom Party government, to build the Issy Low Block Bridge, which is still standing. And he made a very good job of it. In fact, it was a real thing to have had savings on a project of that nature. And I felt it was my duty to go to Alix and discuss. And Alix came and she told me, Baba, sit down. And we sat down there for about an hour, everybody enjoying themselves. And we spoke of a lot of things. And even about in the building where this happy hour was held, was in the Nassif family house right opposite the DBS there. And that's where she had the happy hour. And we sat down there and we spoke as Gub children. Remember, the Nassifs had a nice big mango tree. They call it the mango shiwi. And we go to this boys' school, we would send stones and things, and mangoes for the girl. Alix was there too, would send, and And we discussed it, and I said, you know, when we send the stones, this massive mother, the old lady, she was at the time so kind because she would come to the people, and when the caretakers and would be, she would say, no, leave them, let them come in. She would ask them to open the gate, and we would go and pick the mangoes and bring it to our friends. You know, that was Dominica in those days. And as I said, I am Donald Boyd built that bridge, and we named the bridge Isilovlak Bridge. Alix contributed tremendously, in my view, especially in Parliament. She became, I think, the chairperson of the Women's Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And she was a fighter, as I said before, a fighter for the human rights, for the domestic violence and children. That was Alix at the night. I remember Alix Knight also. Her mother, Eileen. When the mother left the Dominica and went to St. Lucia, her mother made cakes and bakes and everything. And I remember her mother, every time the Dominica team went to St. Lucia to play when she was in St. Lucia, we had a night at Alix Boyd's mother's home, Eileen. We had a night, whether it was cricket, football, as long as the Dominica team was there, she made sure that she would have a night for us at her home. For her husband, who was the cadet corps, captain of the cadet corps in the Dominica Grammar School, was Alix Boyd's mother's husband in St. Lucia. And he too would engage. He was happy to have us with, in Alix. So Alix was in proof and in fact of him, she was Dominican. She was Dominican. And in that respect, you know, just this week, I understand, and with permission, I heard the Speaker of the House, the President House, Mr. Isaac. I heard him giving an apology over the radio this week, and I want to tell him that apology has not gone unrecognized. As a matter of fact, in talking about St. Lucia, his father, Johnson Isaac, who was a member, one of Dominica's great footballer, goalkeeper, who played with me, and I remember when we went to St. Lucia, so we gave him the nickname, his father, we gave him his nickname, schoolboy. For some reason, he was very short. So I want to tell Mr. Isaac that I personally recognize the apology that he made. And I said so because my Lord, and I remember discussing this with on many occasions. I said, Alix, why won't you just, you know, as the lawyer now, make this a public apology for some of these utterances? And I think it would go a long way in uniting the people rather than dividing our Dominica. I went as far as telling her, you must read the book on Justice Stelford Georges, one of the greatest Caribbean jurists who was born in Dominica. And I remember telling her that Mr. Georges, he said, it is a truism that any society, no society can survive without law. It is a truism, he said, that no society can survive without law. And I told her, in uncertain terms, I think it would be in the best interest, knowing you, knowing how we grew up, to just a public apology and let nothing would hurt. In fact, the last time we met, when we had a discussion, it was at the Smart supermarket, and she and Anthony Commodore, another colleague of ours, and myself, she and we call it Commodore and myself, we met at the supermarket after Sunday Mass. We met there at the supermarket, and three of us, we spoke about the same thing of apology. I said, Alix, and so on. And lo and behold, a few days after, Mr. Commodore passed. Mr. Commodore passed. So I know that, the Lord gave and will have taken. I think that the Alix that I know, I think she would just like, she would love to hear the band of the Midnight Groovers from Granby playing at the party, and she dressed in her warm duet and dancing to the music of Midnight Groovers. And with your permission, the song I would interpret, and that song they were playing is the Passé nous a passé. Your permission, it means it's past we are passing. And I think she would love to hear this. I want to, my wife, Zina, Council Zina and Gina joined me in extending condolences to her family and friends and colleagues. He did contribute to Dominica very significantly. As somebody else said, she had left her mark in Dominica. As we extend the condolences to her family and friends, the Lord, I see it. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Now I invite the distinguished Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Director.
May it please you, Honorable Justice Williams, and may it please you, Honorable Justice Jacqueline Graham. I wish to also specifically recognize the presence of Honorable President Hubert Charles and Mrs. Charles, and also the presence via the Zoom platform of Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, Honorable Justice Jean Drysdale, and Honorable Master Alvin Parasi. Alix Boyd Knight was a dear colleague of mine who I hold very close to my heart. I got to know this phenomenal woman at my first appearance at the Court of Appeal. As a young, inexperienced attorney at the time, and having heard of this strict lady, all I was left to do was to have godly reverent fear for the late speaker. But I later came to find out that her back was worse than her bite. On that day, I was introduced to her, or I would say she introduced herself to me by beckoning to me, my child, come sit next to me. Seats were limited on that day in court. And the last seat available was the one next to Mrs. Knight. And she beckoned to me, my child, come sit next to me. And I sat next to her. And on that day, in 15 minutes, I had a friend who was a mentor, who mentored me through my years as an attorney, and at the AG's chambers would always call and check upon me. Ma Knight, as I affectionately refer to her, was a lady who fought for the cause of women and children. She was a professional in family law who always wanted the best outcome for all women, be it matrimonial matters or protection orders. Now, let's not forget her hard work in respect of physical and sexual abuse matters against children. In retrospect, I strongly believe that she became closest to me when I started working as a state attorney at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And I believe that this shows her wit. At the end of the day, she needed to be close to someone to form an alliance with, someone who would help her champion her cause for justice for abused women and children. She sat through several matters watching brief for abuse, as an attorney holding watching briefs for abused children. Running her private chambers and being Speaker of the House, I sometimes wondered, but why Ma Knight not getting a junior counsel to do that for her? Many may not know that these watching briefs were being done pro bono. The way she conducted these matters, attorneys would think that she was properly oxygenated. She would call the chief of police if the investigating officer did not show up at court. She would call the office of the director of public prosecutions if she believed that that is a matter that could be done through paper committal, or if she was simply dissatisfied in the way the matter was being conducted. And she would find an investigating officer, a witness, wherever that witness was. As attorneys, I believe that we ought to continue to champion this cause. The Sexual Offences Act, which was amended in 2016, was amended as a result of a lot of advocacy done by Ma Knight, and also a lot of recommendations came from her in respect of stiffer penalties. She would go beyond the call of duty in these matters, though she did not really practice in the criminal courts. But once there was a sexual matter brought to her attention against a child, she would be the one championing that matter. She would hold a watching brief for free and ensure that this matter was prosecuted in the interest of the child. This was the professional part of Ma Knight. I also got to know the sociable part of Ma Knight. She loved children. Everyone was her child. She loved to cook, and her cooking was to die for. My personal favorite being her cream trifle. She was a phenomenal mother and encouraged mothers to always act in the best interest of their child. Children loved her dearly. For sure, I can vouch that my son looks forward to going to watch Carnival from her porch. I don't know how he's going to take it this year, this Carnival coming. I mean, several of us look forward to Carnival Monday on her porch because we have a lot of goodies there waiting for us. I don't know how she would do it every morning before Carnival. All the goodies would be there properly prepared. Justice Stevenson also spoke of the sociable part of my night. She being a mentor, she being someone you could confide in. And I have been frequently accused by Justice Stevenson of being a dashing leaf, being taunted by the court, being asked questions, and most times as a prosecutor, you always get the wrong end of it. And Justice Stevenson would frequently refer to me as being a dashing leaf. You just let things roll off and you continue with your trial. The secret is that, Justice Stevenson, my night taught me that. You have to be a dashing leaf. Once you hold true to the oath that you have taken as an attorney, you will be taking decisions that are not popular. But as long as these decisions are in the interest of justice, you will stand true and stand firm in your decision. And the secret is that my night taught me this. Also, my night also taught us that we have to live life to the fullest in whatever capacity we are in life, be it a mother, be it an attorney, be it a cook, a farmer, we do our best at it. Okay? And also enjoy life. I remember that Calypso song that Justice Stevenson spoke of. And pun intended, that old speaker, that was the name of the song. And when that song played that carnival season, I clearly remember I was in one of the carnival bands reveling with Council Athlin Nesty. My night came downstairs on the streets during carnival, and when she heard that song playing, she started dancing with us. She started dancing with us, knowing that the pun intended in that song was in respect of her. She enjoyed the song. She lived life to the fullest. She loved carnival. She loved Christmas. Independence is not going to be the same with her. It's quite fitting that one of the photos on the program for this morning is she in her national wear, which exemplifies what the person she was, a true Dominican lady and exceptional in everything she did. I do hope that we follow her legacy. We continue to champion the rights of women and children, as former Attorney General Ambassador Francine Barron spoke of. And we also continue to hold true to the oath that we take. No matter if we make unpopular decisions, as long as we know that these decisions are in the interest of justice, we hold true to our oaths. Always consider that. To the family of my dear friend, colleague, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions extends sympathy, and we hope that you hold on to the memories, the fond memories that you had with this phenomenal woman. Okay. It pleases the court.
Thank you, Madam. On behalf of the Bar Association, Madam President, it was really nice.
It pleases you, Lord Justice Colin Williams, Lady Justice Josiah Graham. I wish to just adopt the protocol that has already been established. But I, of course, wish to recognize the presence of His Excellency, Mr. Hubert Charles, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mrs. Charles, Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, High Court Judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Honorable Justice Janice Drysdale, Honorable Master Alvin Parayak Singh, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly. My lords, with your leave, I also wish to greet the family and friends of the late Alix Boyd Knights, especially her loving grandchildren and her daughters, Amber and Ashel and Ayandra, who is also a member of this profession, and my dear friend. Good morning. My lords, I wish to say just a few words in memoriam of our sister, the deceased Alix Boyd Knights, and to express my heartfelt sympathy, condolences to her family, her staff, and her friends. My lords, these words of sympathy come not just from me, but on behalf of the Dominica Bar Association, on behalf of the other members of my chambers, Mr. Geoffrey Harris, SC, and Ms. Joel Harris, as well as on behalf of myself and my family. My lords, what can I say that has not already been said about this force of a woman, Speaker Emerita Alix Boyd Knights? We know well about her rise to prominence in the field of politics and of law, and particularly family law. We heard a lot about her role in family law, the role that she played in the passing of various pieces of legislation. Most recently, she played a part in the passing of the Maintenance of Children's Act, which increased the minimum amount of maintenance for children. For her part, as she said to me, she wished it would have been higher, but here we are, at least it is higher now than it was before. And we know her, of course, as being a bastion for the rights of women and children. For my part, my lords, I have known Ms. Boyd Knights from my very early teenage days. And from then, I regarded her as a person not to be messed with. My first memory of Ms. Boyd Knights is of her confidently driving her blue sedan from Bath Road onto the underway of the Convent High School ahead of a special assembly. Now, this was something I had never seen any parent do or dare to do before. There was no express rule against it, huh? But I suppose Alix, or Ms. Boyd Knights, being her logical self, she thought there's lots of parking on the other side. Why not just drive through and park there? And that was the nature of the person. Confident, bold, practical, and analytical in her thinking. During those teenage days, my lord, Ms. Boyd Knights, the daughter, Ayandra, who I fondly call Andy, fondly called by all, Andy, she and I were best of friends. And we were constantly at each other's homes. Mm-hmm. Probably me so more at her home than her at mine. Because while my family was a household of 8, hers was just 2. So we had significantly more freedom at her home. I recall that the first time I tried my hand at curry chicken was at her home, where Andy and I carefully took instructions over the telephone from her as she told us to begin sauteing the garlic and the onion and ensure that we cook the curry before adding the chicken. My lords, we know that above all else, Miss Knights was an avid and passionate cook. But as a young person, this is not what stood out for me. What stood out was the fact that she was a lawyer. As a teenager, this was what I was in awe of, that she was a lawyer. And she was, in fact, probably the first lawyer that I had actually met in person. And on top of that, she was a female lawyer. She was a woman. So no doubt, at that time, she played an inspiring part in me choosing my eventual career as a lawyer. I recall visiting her office with Andy after we received our CXC results. And of course, she was overjoyed, ecstatic about both of our results, you know, not just her daughter, but of mine as well, you know. And we discussed the possibility then of becoming lawyers. She encouraged us and she said, don't mind the number of lawyers. There's always room for good lawyers. And you do your best, be one of the better ones. There's always room at the top. And she didn't just stop there. She also went into specifics, speaking with us about whether at all it would be financially rewarding, because that was the kind of person that she was. She was practical. So she discussed fees with us. Even at that stage, she discussed fees with us and discussed whether it will still make sense, even when we eventually become lawyers, whether it will be rewarding. My lords, my lady, I believe it is this type of guidance, practical, confident, yet loving, which I am sure has nurtured her 3 daughters and her grandchildren into the successful people that they are today. My lord, my ladies, as an adult, I would have interacted with Miss Boyd-Knights a little less, particularly as her area of legal practice and mine may not have often met. But she continued to hold a very special place in my heart. She was unafraid of controversy and spoke her mind at all times. She certainly even gave me my piece once or twice already, and I into her. But on those occasions, by the next time we met, our interaction resumed in the normal, pleasant way. Get it off your chest, and that's it. My lord, my ladies, our last meeting was in relation to a possible divorce settlement, just about 2 or 3 months ago, not very long ago, in her office. And both our respective clients were present, and we more or less resolved the way forward with that divorce in half an hour. But another half an hour to an hour was still spent in her office, with her giving us stories after stories. Stories of her trips overseas, stories of her trips just around Dominica, advocating family law matters, and giving us a bit of her own family history as well. And when I asked her if she was going to write those intimate stories into a book one day, she answered, well, everybody asked me to do so. But the joy is in relating the stories in conversation. I am certain, my lords, that a lot more will be told and in fact written of the life of Honorable Alix Boyd-Knight, Speaker Emerita. For her journey was unique, her impact powerful, and the memories of her distinctive and lasting. To her daughters, her grandchildren, and other family members, and to her staff and friends, I say hold on to those memories to find solace and comfort, and eventually serenity and peace. May her soul rest in peace. If it please you.
And we move along to the former president of the Bar Association, Mrs. Heather Alix Evans.
May it please you, my lord. Justice Colin Williams, my lady. Justice Jacqueline Graham, Josiah Graham. His Excellency Hubert J. Charles, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mrs. Charles. Honorable Bernie Stevenson. Justice Jan Drysdale. Honorable Justice Jan Drysdale. Honorable Master Alvin Periag Singh. Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly. Honorable Levi A. Peter, Attorney General. Family and friends of Alix Boyd-Knights. And at this point, I will adopt the list as already adopted or established. I met Alix 30 years ago when she had her law office in the Pringle building on King George V Street. I do not recall if I was already a lawyer or just had been called or was just been called to the bar. But I know that I would have gone to Alix's office then to visit Heather, her secretary, who to the date of her death remained her secretary. During that first visit, Alix looked me straight in the eyes and said to me in a very firm but pleasant tone and smiling countenance, I am a cook who practices law. From that first meeting, Alix and I established a friendly relationship which lasted up to her death. Occasionally, I would chat with Alix in her office, or we would call each other on the phone. When we discovered that we shared the same birthday, we tried to call each other on that day to exchange birthday greetings and well wishes. From my interactions with Alix and my observations about her, this is the person I knew her to be. She was one who was open and proud about the fact that cooking was and remained her first love. She was one who loved her family, her daughters, and her grandchildren. She would talk about them frequently, especially when they were at primary school age. Even after so many years, the nicknames Pips and Pops have stuck with me, and I am knitting Pips. I recall how devastated Alix was many years ago when she lost her granddaughter, or one of her granddaughters. She also spoke often of her childhood days, and from what I heard her say, it appeared that she loved her parents very dearly. Alix engaged in a law practice that was strongly focused on representing women and children, especially in cases where she believed that they were being abused or taken advantage of. Many regarded her, and still regard her, as a champion of and for women and children in Dominica. She wanted women to be and feel empowered. Alix played a key role on the committee that was established in or about 2000 to review and comment on the initial draft of Dominica's first Domestic Violence Act. Notwithstanding that she was regarded by many as the lawyer that does represent women, Alix showed a commitment to advocating for and representing the interests of persons that she considered vulnerable, whatever the gender or age. If my recollection serves me right, I think it was about 10 years ago that Alix began to talk about closing down her practice. That dream never became a reality before her death, because I strongly suspect her loyal clients or persons referred to her by these clients continued to seek her services, and she, unable to say no to them, continued to provide these services. Alix was a person of indomitable courage. That characteristic was on full public display during her 20 years as Speaker of the House of Assembly of Dominica. She was a strong and effective speaker throughout her tenure. And because of her sound knowledge and application of the standing orders, most, if not all, of her rulings that were challenged in the courts were upheld. Alix's undaunted courage was also demonstrated in her responses to her most rabid critics and opponents. Alix did not allow herself to be cowed by anyone or anything. She gave as good as she got. Alix loved her country and was a true patriot. After living some years out of Dominica and upon completion of her legal studies, she chose to return to live and work in Dominica, her country of birth. To date, Alix is the individual who has served the longest in the office of Speaker of the House of Assembly. She enjoyed and practiced the Dominica culture. She loved independence celebrations and wore the national wear with pride and dignity. She loved calypsos, even those that sought to attack her or poke fun at her. When she was not in the moment engaged in the performance of her duties as Speaker of the House or representing her clients in what was or could become a contentious matter, Alix was easygoing and fun. She had a sharp tongue and a great sense of humor. She always had a joke to tell, and she enjoyed telling it as much as I enjoyed listening to it. Her ability to recall details of events that happened long ago was amazing. And her recount of her exchanges with her critics and opponents was always very entertaining. For many, Alix has gone too soon. She still had so much to offer this world. But in truth, Alix lived a full life. She traveled far and wide. She met and knew many people from all over the world. She served her country in the public sector and at a very high level for an exceptionally long time, and she impacted many lives. Alix made her mark in Dominica's political and legislative history. Her culinary skills and her entertaining stories will always be remembered. Everyone who had the opportunity to interact with Alix or who listened to her while she presided over the proceedings in Parliament will always remember her. Alix is unforgettable. She will be missed. It would be a wonderful blessing if each of us here today is able to get to Alix's age, 78, and have the mental and physical alertness that she had on the day before she died. On my own behalf and on behalf of my husband and the staff of Optimum Legal, I extend condolences to Alix's daughters, grandchildren, in-laws, long-serving and dedicated secretary, Heather, her brother, other family members, relatives, and friends. We cannot begin to imagine the added grief and loss that you are experiencing because of the suddenness of Alix's death. We pray that in time, the happy memories that you have of your mom, granny, boss, sister, loved one, and friend will replace the loss and grief that you now feel. May Eileen Alix Boyd Knights rest in eternal peace. My Lord and my Lady, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this court.
The final meal on the program. Mr. Leonard Lawrence.
May it please you, my lord. Justice Paul Williams. May it please you, my lady. Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham. Lord, my lady, I recognize the presence of His Excellency, the Acting President, Hubert J. Charles, and his wife, Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, Honorable Justice John Drysdale, Honorable Master Alvin Pariat Singh, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Honorable Levi Peters, Attorney General. Lord, I also adopt the protocol which has been established and also recognize in particular the family of our fallen sister. My Lord, my lady, it was Mark Anthony who said in scene 2 of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, "Friends, Roman countrymen, lend me your ears. I have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him." But that was not all. He said further, "The good that men do is often interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus has told you that Caesar was ambitious. If it was so, it was a grievous fault, and Caesar had answered it." My Lord, there were faults that our sister had, but her virtues far outweighed whatever could be said about her as being a fault. Lord, there was a greater truth that Mark Anthony spoke, and I wish to adopt them but amend them slightly to refer to our sister. He said, "It is not right, my fellow citizens, for the funeral oration in praise of so great a woman to be delivered by me. a single individual instead of by the whole country. The honors that all of you like, first the parliament and then the people, decreed for her in admiration of her qualities when she was still alive. These I shall read aloud and regard my voice as being not mine, but yours. So, my Lord, the words that I speak and I refer to the virtues of this our sister, I would see them and consider them as the words of the country in relation to so great a woman. My Lord, our sister often spoke of herself, as you heard, and she spoke to me of herself as a cook who practiced law. But she was not just a cook and a lawyer. She was an activist, the lover of culture and carnival, a sojourner in the search for justice. She was distinguished, controversial. She loved controversy. She was often uncaring of the criticisms of others, yet she was dignified and she was cultured. My Lord, my lady, in my early days as an attorney, I had an experience of our fallen sister that left a profound impression on me as a young attorney, and it left lingering questions. My Lord, I will speak of two episodes. First, I was invited to a residence one evening, a young attorney. But as your lordship indicated, I was the last male on the panel of speakers. I was the only male among a group of distinguished and illustrious women that night, the residence. But at that gathering, it became patently obvious to me that she was a leading advocate for gender justice and gender equality. But the conversation was predominantly about gender justice for women. So I learned a lot. 25 years later, her work and her contribution has resulted in the empowerment of women and overall in greater gender justice for women. But there's another reason, though, that night left a great impression on me. It was because of the sumptuous meal that was prepared. And my Lord, justice could only be done to that meal if there was a second or third serving. I have forgotten how many servings I had, but I did justice. Lord, our sister was someone who was overcome by this passion for justice. And there are two episodes I wish to commend for the court's consideration. The first episode was what occurred on the 17th of November, 1998. A certain police officer, Bernard, whose number was PC-133, he issued a ticket, number 26863. And the particulars of that ticket read as follows: that you did use car registration number 8757, front plate of which the figures were not upright and easily distinguishable. The fixed penalty was $75. The defendant, my lord, who was charged, was a young attorney named Alix Knights. And she felt aggrieved for diverse reasons. The first of which was that the officer could simply tilt his head. The number was not upright. So she retained a young lawyer by the name of Lennox Lawrence. And she stood up against what she thought was an obvious wrong. She preferred the pursuit of justice instead of paying $75. That was a measure of bravery, passion. She was motivated, my lord, by the saying attributed to Edmund Burke, that evil thrives when good people do nothing. She preferred to do something. The second episode commenced on the 10th of May, 1999, when suit number 266 of 1999 was filed. And that suit, my lord and my lady, was seeking damages for loss and damage caused to the plaintiff by nuisance by noise, and an injunction to restrain the defendant from causing any further nuisance to the plaintiff by noise from the first and second defendant's premises at Trafalgar. Well, the injunction was granted. The plaintiff was Alix Boyd Knights. And the injunction, by the injunction, the defendants were restrained from playing or permitting to be played amplified music through loudspeakers on the first and second defendant's property and or in the residential neighborhood of the village of Trafalgar, so as to cause a nuisance to the plaintiff or other occupiers of the plaintiff's premises. The second order was a bit more direct, and they were injuncted from singing, shouting, or screaming, or projecting the voices through loudspeakers in the defendant's premises and or in the residential neighborhood of Trafalgar, so as to cause a nuisance to the plaintiff or other occupiers of the premises. The lawyer was Lennox Lawrence. But there were several ironies about that injunction. And I would wish your lordship has just come to Dominica, so I would just give your lordship a little tour of the landscape at that time. The first irony, my lord, was who the lawyer was. That was the first irony, and I will indicate why shortly. The second irony was that the defendant, the first named defendant, was a former minister of the Dominica Freedom Party government, whose name would remain not be mentioned. And he was known by the lawyer for obvious reasons of a political nature, and certainly associations of not too of recent vintage at that time. He was also known by my learned friend, Magistrate Packet. But the third irony was that the fourth named defendant was a pastor. And the injunction was possibly the first ever injunction granted against the holding of certain religious ceremonies. And it did directly impact on the loud and boisterous church services when it was felt that certain persons needed a change of heart. However, my lord, the further irony was that the lawyer in question had some experience in that area in the holding of certain services. Whether they show that, I'm sure that some of my colleagues would explain to you that. But the lesson here was that our sister Alix Boyd Knights feared no one. whether you were a pastor, a priest, a politician, or an overzealous police officer, she would not back down. She stood for what she believed in, and she took her case to wherever she thought was necessary. That was the person who we celebrate today. And I'm sure that this person who family knows that she was. So it was of no surprise, my Lord, that when she took the gavel of the speakership of the legislature, she remained passionate about gender justice. And she wrestled with the less wise men in the parliament, who after her tenure, my Lord, developed some form of wisdom about the resilience and strength of a woman, because she was both resilient and strong. Lord, it should be noted that her passion for justice did not diminish her zeal for elegance and culture and etiquette, because she introduced, in her time, this tradition that the learned former Attorney General and Ambassador Barron spoke about, for women wearing headgears and hats and fascinators in the parliament. And I'm sure your lordship will be invited to the parliament, as your ladyship has been invited. And my lord, there is such an array of designs that Louis Vuitton, my lord, has it is quite something to behold. I'm sure that your ladyship would agree. It is. But in one of our last conversations, our sister told me of a continuing passion for the culinary arts, and which she had made into a tour, a cooking tour for tourists. The venue for those tours, my lord, I understand, if I'm correct, was the same property at Trafalgar where I had been invited that night, and where the injunction, my lord, had been granted in relation to. Well, not the Creole cuisine of which our friend boasted about was possibly the highlight of the tour for the tourists who came here, as they savored the taste and the delicacies that were prepared by our sister. But I am reliably informed that there is a compilation of books, which is called the Bible. And in one of those books, my lord, in that compilation, there is a book called the Book of Isaiah. I'm just informed.
Yes.
And verily believe. But it is said in that book, I'm told, that there's a passage that says, on this mountain, the Lord will prepare a feast of rich foods for all peoples, a banquet of aged wines, the best of meats and the finest of wines. But Lord, I submit for the court's consideration that this table and the meal which is spoken has the imagery of what has been prepared by our sister over those years. And so I hasten to add that should she be permitted on the other side to partake of those meals, she will most likely ask that the menu be changed. And she might ask, my lord, that they should introduce cockpit sancoach, fried titiriacra, crab backs, some kubuyan, and black cakes must be added to that menu. So she would have an impact on that side as well, I'm sure. And for this reason, my lord, I would urge the learned president of the Bar Association to consider that we could immortalize her memory with a distinguished Alix Boyd Knight Memorial Dinner at regular occasions, which will not be a black-tie affair, but rather would be an affair where the men would wear their Creole outfit and the women would wear the madras. And we would have great discourse, which would begin with gender justice, which moved them a lot, and the concepts of which is that at those dinners we'll have that discussion, someone would present. Well, Lord, I conclude in the words of Mark Anthony, of which I spoke earlier, that it is not right for the funeral oration of so great a woman to be delivered by me, a single individual, but instead, my Lord, I would invite the entire country to mourn her passing and to recognize her life with some degree of value, something which will keep the memory alive for many years to come. My Lord, I extend the condolences to a family, beloved family, from us all at Platinum Law Chambers. And I pray, my Lord, that her soul may rest in peace and rise in eternal glory. May it be so.
Thank you. Yes, we'll move on to Ms. Rosen Child.
His Excellency Hubert J. Charles, acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Honorable Justice and Mrs. Charles, Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, High Court Judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Honorable Justice Pauline Williams, Resident High Court Judge, Honorable Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham, Resident High Court Judge, Honorable Justice Drysdale, Honorable Master Alvin Pariaxi, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Honorable Levi A. Peter, Attorney General, Ambassador Francine Barron, former Attorney General, Mrs. Tamika Burton, Solicitor General, Ms. Shirma Darampur, Director of Public Prosecutions, Ms. Marie-Therese Etienne, Registrar of the High Court, Ms. Nuraya Sebastian, Deputy Registrar, Mr. Henry Dyer, former Attorney General, Mrs. Noelis Nightingale, President of the Bar Association, other members of the HINA and of the bar, Mr. Daniel James, Clerk of the House of Assembly, family members of Mrs. Alix Knight, and other invited guests. My lords, I would like to start off with a poem by Robert Frost, Nothing Gold Can Stay. There's nature's, many people will be familiar with it, I think. Nature's first green is gold, the hardest hue to hold. The early leaves are flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so evening sang to day. So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. And I decided to recite just this short poem because the imagery used in this poem is of flowers, of plants, of nature. And I remember Alix most fondly because of her love for nature. Most people remember her because of her culinary skills, but I remember her for her beautiful floral arrangements and that she really loved her garden. I first met Alix because of her daughter, Iandra. We were schoolmates, maybe from first form at Convent High School. Just as Noelis, Mrs. Knight's DD mentioned, we were all in the same class. And but I really got to know her when I became a lawyer. And when I became a lawyer and I went to speak to her, I approached her, as Mrs. Knight. And maybe she knowing that I'm very much a quiet person, she said to me, we are colleagues. You should call me Alix. I don't want to call him Mrs. Knight. So from that time, it took a little bit of doing on my part, but now it's almost impossible for me to call her Mrs. Knight. So we would converse from time to time. And when I worked at Legal Aid, a lot of the matters that we did concerned domestic violence, family issues. So I always had reason to speak with her. Sometimes we were on the opposite side of cases, but we were always very respectful to each other. And I very much valued her input. I very much valued her counsel. There were times when I didn't agree with her, but we were always very respectful to each other. It was fun being in court sometimes when Alix was present because there was always banter, sometimes with her and other lawyers. There's a saying in Patois that Alix was very witty. There's a saying in Patois where we say, we post met, it is the response that is the trump. And Justice Stevenson gave just an example. Alix always had the good response, in a sense. A very witty person, very sharp. She knew a lot of idioms. And I will miss talking to her. I think our last conversation was maybe the day or 2 days before she passed away. So I'll miss her conversation. I will miss conversations. I will miss her advice. Sometimes she gave advice on so many different things, not necessarily just legal matters, but matters pertaining to even parenting. She encouraged me to get my daughter to do gardening because she's a ball of energy. And Alix always said to me, give her a little plot of land, let her plant, let her see that whatever it is that she's planted is growing and she can take care of it and so on. So Alix was also very kind with her advice, kind also with sharing her thoughts on things, sharing her life experiences. As I said before, I will miss conversing with her. But as the poem says, nothing gold, you can't speak. That is part of life. We wish that those that we love would stay longer, but we have to accept life for what it is. I wish to sympathize with her family. I know that you miss her, and I think those of us in the bar who were her friends, we will miss her also. We miss her already. May it please you, our Lord.
Grandson, do you have a copy?
My Lord and my Lady, if it pleases this honorable court, I would like to recognize the presence of His Excellency Hubert J. Charles, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mrs. Charles, Honorable Justice Bernie Stevenson, High Court Judge, Honorable Colin Williams, Honorable Jacqueline Josiah Graham, Honorable Drysdale, Honorable Alvin Perry-Assing, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Speaker of the House, and Honorable Levi Peter, and I wish to adopt the protocol as established for this eminent list. My Lady and my Lord, on behalf of my family, I extend sincere condolences to the family and friends of Honorable Speaker Emerita, former Speaker of the House of Assembly, Attorney at Law, Alix Boyd-Knights. I pray for you and her family. I pray for you, her family, and friends, that the joy of the Lord will both strengthen you and comfort you as you grieve. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 55, we read, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" Death didn't sting Mrs. Boyd-Knight. The truth is, death stings those of us who are left behind, who will miss her hearty laugh, her biting sense of humor, and those tricks, her guided wisdom, and the laws as laid down by her as only she could. Permit me, my Lord and my Lady, and the family of the late Mrs. Boyd-Knight, to simply refer to her as Auntie Alix. This affectionate title was born out of the extraordinary nephew-auntie relationship that she and my husband Val shared, and by extension, myself. Why is it an extension? For those of you who know me well, you know that the way to my heart is through how well you love Val. Auntie Alix loved Val well, and it wasn't one-sided. I propose to present you with a picture of an affectionate, critical, passionate soul whose death stings because we miss her giant personality. Much has been said and written about her formidable advocacy on the rights of vulnerable women and children, her love for carnival, cooking, hosting, horticulture, and I adopt and endorse the tributes of her memory. But it's the gentleness of the giant I wish to share with you, illustrated by our endless encounters with her. We, meaning Val and I, have opted to mention two areas, politics and calypso. She loved both. With regards to calypso, Auntie Alix was usually the first to listen to or read Val's lyrics. And she would call him, nephew, as if to frighten him. You need to fix that song. Or she would say, I like it. I really like it. Or she would say, take that word out. Take out that line about my bon Jean. What are you doing with that song? Who gave you that foolishness? But she paid attention to details and she reasoned it out with him. It was not all about her likes and dislikes, but the message in that song. And sometimes she shot the messenger, but she did it lovingly. Her musical attributes were inspiring. When she did not like something, we would hear about it. There is one vivid story that stands out. During the 2019 political campaign, Val made his appearance on the stage for the opposition. I got a call. Why you let my nephew make that magie with himself? For those of you who do not know magie, it's foolishness. I laughed. And I said to her, well, call him and tell him. She laughed. She did not call him. But a few weeks later, we were in town and she met us. Val was wearing a red shirt. And she said, welcome home, my nephew. You have come to your senses at last. We all laughed. Death didn't sting Auntie Alix because she lived her life well. Val and I were the beneficiaries of her endless treats. And whenever we refused to eat something we considered too sweet, she would laugh and say, sir, zoza fezo. That is all your business. I am not diabetic and I am eating everything. Auntie Alix enjoyed a good dessert. She also started a trend for me and for Val. On one International Women's Day, she called Val and ordered him to get me flowers. And the flowers came from her garden. They were orchids. That was the first time I received orchids. And every year he had to get me flowers. She knew I loved flowers. Today we are surrounded by remnants of the sting of death on the passing of Auntie Alix, who was a mother, a granny, auntie, friend, speaker, a colleague. And so we know that grief is a heavy load. But when it is shared, it becomes easier to carry. And so the family who are gathered here today, we propose to share the grief with you. I would like to end with a poem from Maya Angelou. She says, when I think of death and of the late idea, when I think of death and of late the idea has come with alarming frequency, I seem at peace with the idea that a day will dawn when I will no longer be among those living in this valley of strange humors. I can accept the idea of my own demise, but I am unable to accept the death of anyone else. I find it impossible to let a friend or relative go into the country of no return. Disbelief becomes my close companion, and anger follows in its wake. I answer the heroic question, death, where is your sting? With it, is here in my heart and mind and memories. My lady and my lord, Thank you for affording me this opportunity to address this honorable court. May the angels welcome her into paradise and may her soul rest in peace. If it pleases this one.
Now hear from my sister, the leadership, the Honorable Madam Justice Jacqueline Josiah Graham, to give us the closing remarks from the bench.
Thank you, Justice Williams. In these closing remarks, Excellency Yuan Charles, acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mr. Charles, Honorable Justice Stevenson, High Court Judge, Honorable Justice Drysdale, High Court Judge, Honorable Mr. Harriet Singh, Master, the Honorable Joseph Isaacs, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Honorable Levi Peter, Attorney General, Ambassador Barron, Mrs. Burton, Solicitor General, Ms. Dalrymple, Director of the Public Prosecution, Madam Registrar of the High Court, Madam Deputy Registrar of the High Court, Mr. Dyer, former Attorney General, Mrs. Knights, President of the Bar Association, Mrs. Felix Evans, former President of the Bar Association. I believe we had Mr. Raphael Schwartman, former Speaker of the House of Assembly of Ghana, the family members, friends, colleagues of the late Mrs. Alix Boyd, other invited guests, and the media. Counsel Mrs. Boyd Knights will be missed for the life she brought to the courtroom every time she appeared, whether via the Zoom platform or in the courthouse. She forcefully represented her client's interests and never missed an opportunity to be candid with the court, especially concerning her experiences using the virtual platform. The last time she appeared in court in June, she remonstrated with her colleague counsel. She informed the court of her impending personal matters and requested adjournment to the new law firm when she was sure we will be began. Then the court had suggested she find junior counsel to assist due to the number of tasks she had to undertake in the matter she had pending. But she was resolute that a legal secretary who had been with her for a number of years was going to handle the load while she was away. Little did we know then that today in the quiet corridors of this High Court, where she valiantly represented her clients, we would be gathered to celebrate her journey that was both remarkable and profoundly touching. Her outstanding contribution to the Caribbean law and to the Commonwealth of Dominica, her advocacy and her activism for the rights of women and children, and on domestic violence and other family legislation. In my interactions with counsel, Mrs. Boyd Knights, she reminded me to take some time to enjoy Dominica and its natural beauty and its food. As for the food, I recall learning quite a bit, apart from her remarkable career, about her culinary skills when she was recognized in 2021 by the CCJ Academy for Law as a pioneering Caribbean women jurist. In the profile compiled by Dr. Ronnie Church, which was referred to earlier by Ambassador Barron. As we bid farewell, in her memory, let us carry forward her zest for life and the joyous celebration of the bold and beautiful moments that define her journey on this earth, buoyed by the breadth of her achievements and the legacy she has left behind. Mr. Lawrence, your suggestion for that annual event in memory of Mrs. Boyd Knight could impasse the advocacy and the charting of part of strategy across this region to continue to add value to her work. includes a closing on behalf of the Chief Justice, Dame Janice Pereira, and the bench of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. I offer the court's heartfelt condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Mrs. Boyd Knights. May your memories of her remind you of the beautiful moments shared, the laughter that echoed in your homes, the love that blossomed in your hearts, the lessons that she imparted, the values that she added, and how our own life was enriched by your contributions. Thank you.
Yeah, just at this point, I'd like to state that the court hereby directs that the registrar makes available a copy of today's proceedings to the family members of the deceased. And as we rise to have this special sitting adjourned, we would await the departure of, when we rise, we'll allow His Excellency, the President, to leave before we depart. Okay? This special sitting is now adjourned.
All stand. This honorable court stands adjourned sine die. Please remain standing for the departure of His Excellency, Mr. Herbert Charles, Acting President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Mrs. Charles.
What do you think?